Book II, Section 9 of On Duties by Cicero, translated by Walter Miller. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. 9. But friendship has been discussed in another book of mine entitled Laelius. Let us now take up the discussion of glory, although I have published 2 books on that subject also. Still, let us touch briefly on it here, since it is a very great help in the conduct of more important business. The highest, truest glory depends upon the following 3 things: the affection, the confidence, and the mingled admiration and esteem of the people. Such sentiments, if I may speak plainly and concisely, are awakened in the masses in the same way as in individuals. But there is also another avenue of approach to the masses, by which we can, as it were, steal into the hearts of all at once. But of the 3 above-named requisites, let us look first at goodwill and the rules for securing it. Goodwill is won principally through kind services. Next to that, it is elicited by the will to do a kind service, even though nothing happen to come of it. Then, too, the love of people generally is powerfully attracted by a man's mere name and reputation for generosity, kindness, justice, honor, and all those virtues that belong to gentleness of character and affability of manner. And because that very quality, which we term moral goodness and propriety, is pleasing to us by and of itself, and touches all our hearts both by its inward essence and its outward aspect, and shines forth with most lustre through those virtues named above, we are, therefore, compelled by nature herself to love those in whom we believe those virtues to reside. Now, these are only the most powerful motives to love, not all of them. There may be some minor ones besides. Secondly, the command of confidence can be secured on 2 conditions. 1. If people think us possessed of practical wisdom combined with a sense of justice; for we have confidence in those who we think have more understanding than ourselves, who, we believe, have better insight into the future, and who, when an emergency arises and a crisis comes, can clear away the difficulties and reach a safe decision according to the exigencies of the occasion. For that kind of wisdom the world accounts genuine and practical. But, 2. Confidence is reposed in men who are just and true, that is, good men, on the definite assumption that their characters admit of no suspicion of dishonesty or wrong‐doing. And so we believe that it is perfectly safe to entrust our lives, our fortunes, and our children to their care. Of these 2 qualities, then, justice has the greater power to inspire confidence; for even without the aid of wisdom it has considerable weight. But wisdom without justice is of no avail to inspire confidence. For take from a man his reputation for probity, and the more shrewd and clever he is, the more hated and mistrusted he becomes. Therefore, justice, combined with practical wisdom, will command all the confidence we can desire. Justice without wisdom will be able to do much; wisdom without justice will be of no avail at all. 10. But I am afraid some one may wonder why I am now separating the virtues, as if it were possible for any one to be just who is not at the same time wise. For it is agreed upon among all philosophers, and I myself have often argued, that he who has one virtue has them all. The explanation of my apparent inconsistency is, that the precision of speech we employ when abstract truth is critically investigated in philosophic discussion is one thing, and that employed when we are adapting our language entirely to popular thinking is another. And therefore I am speaking here in the popular sense, when I call some men brave, others good, and still others wise; for in dealing with popular conceptions we must employ familiar words in their common acceptation, and this was the practice of Panetius likewise. But let us return to the subject. The third, then, of the three conditions I named as essential to glory is, that we be accounted worthy of the esteem and admiration of our fellow men. While people admire in general everything that is great or better than they expect, they admire in particular the good qualities that they find unexpectedly in individuals; and so they reverence and extol with the highest praises those men in whom they see certain preeminent and extraordinary talents, and they look down with contempt upon those who they think have no ability, no spirit, no energy. For they do not despise all those of whom they think ill; for some men they consider unscrupulous, slanderous, fraudulent, and dangerous. They do not despise them, it may be, but they do think ill of them. And therefore, as I said before, those are despised who are of no use to themselves or their neighbors, as the saying is, who are idle, lazy, and indifferent. On the other hand, those are regarded with admiration who are thought to excel others in ability, and to be free from all dishonor, and also from those vices which others do not easily resist. For sensual pleasure, a most seductive mistress, turns the hearts of the greater part of humanity away from virtue; and when the fiery trial of affliction draws near, most people are terrified beyond measure. Life and death, wealth and want, affect all men most powerfully. But when men, with a spirit great and exalted, can look down upon such outward circumstances, whether prosperous or adverse, and when some noble and virtuous purpose, presented to their minds, converts them wholly to itself, and carries them away in its pursuit, who then could fail to admire in them the splendor and beauty of virtue? XI. As, then, this superiority of mind to such externals inspires great admiration, so justice, above all, on the basis of which alone men are called good men, seems to people generally a quite marvellous virtue, and not without good reason. For no one can be just who fears death, or pain, or exile, or poverty, or who values their opposites above equity. And people admire especially the man who is uninfluenced by money; and if a man has proved himself in this direction, they think him tried as by fire. Those three requisites, therefore, which were presupposed as the means of obtaining glory, are all secured by justice. I. Good will, for it seeks to be of help to the greatest number. II. Confidence, for the same reason. And III. Admiration, because it scorns and cares nothing for those things, with a consuming passion for which most people are carried away. Now, in my opinion, at least, every walk and vocation in life calls for human cooperation; first, and above all, in order that one may have friends with whom to enjoy social intercourse; and this is not easy unless one is looked upon as a good man. So even to a man who shuns society, and to one who spends his life in the country, a reputation for justice is essential; even more so than to others; for they who do not have it, but are considered unjust, will have no defense to protect them, and so will be the victims of many kinds of wrong. So also to buyers and sellers, to employers and employed, and to those who are engaged in commercial dealings generally, justice is indispensable for the conduct of business. Its importance is so great, that not even those who live by wickedness and crime can get on without some small element of justice. For if a robber takes anything by force, or by fraud from another member of the gang, he loses his standing even in a band of robbers; and if the one called the pirate captain should not divide the plunder impartially, he would be either deserted or murdered by his comrades. Why, they say that robbers even have a code of laws to observe and obey; and so, because of his impartial division of booty, Bartolus, the Illyrian bandit, of whom we read in Theopompus, acquired great power; Viriathus of Lusitania much greater. He actually defied even our armies and generals. But Gaius Laelius, the one surnamed the Wise, in his praetorship, crushed his power, reduced him to terms and so checked his intrepid daring that he left to his successors an easy conquest. Since, therefore, the efficacy of justice is so great that it strengthens and augments the power even of robbers, how great do we think its power will be in a constitutional government with its laws and courts? XII. Now, it seems to me, at least, that not only among the Medes, as Herodotus tells us, but also among our own ancestors, men of high moral character were made kings in order that the people might enjoy justice. For as the masses in their helplessness were oppressed by the strong, they appealed for protection to some one man who was conspicuous for his virtue; and as he shielded the weaker classes from wrong, he managed, by establishing equitable conditions, to hold the higher and the lower classes in an equality of right. The reason for making constitutional laws was the same as that for making kings. For what people have always sought is equality of rights before the law; for rights that were not open to all alike would be no rights. If the people secured their end at the hands of one just and good man, they were satisfied with that; but when such was not their good fortune, laws were invented to speak to all men at all times in one and the same voice. This, then, is obvious. Nations used to select for their rulers those men whose reputation for justice was high in the eyes of the people. If, in addition, they were also thought wise, there was nothing that men did not think they could not secure under such leadership. Justice is, therefore, in every way to be cultivated and maintained, both for its own sake, for otherwise it would not be justice, and for the enhancement of personal honor and glory. But as there is a method not only of acquiring money, but also of investing it so as to yield an income to meet our continuously recurring expenses, both for the necessities and for the more refined comforts of life, so there must be a method of gaining glory and turning it to account. And yet, as Socrates used to express it so admirably, the nearest way to glory, a short cut as it were, is to strive to be what you wish to be thought to be. For if any one thinks that he can win lasting glory by pretense, by empty show, by hypocritical talk and looks, he is very much mistaken. True glory strikes deep root and spreads its branches wide; but all pretenses soon fall to the ground like fragile flowers, and nothing counterfeit can be lasting. There are very many witnesses to both facts; but for brevity's sake I shall confine myself to one family. Tiberius Gracchus, Publius's son, will be held in honor as long as the memory of Rome shall endure. But his sons were not approved by patriots while they lived; and since they are dead, they are numbered among those whose murder was justifiable. XIII. If, therefore, any one wishes to win true glory, let him discharge the duties required by justice; and what they are has been set forth in the course of the preceding book (XIII). But although the very essence of the problem is that we actually be what we wish to be thought to be, still some rules may be laid down to enable us most easily to secure the reputation of being what we are. For if any one in his early youth has the responsibility of living up to a distinguished name acquired either by inheritance from his father, as I think, my dear Cicero, is your good fortune, or by some chance or happy combination of circumstances, the eyes of the world are turned upon him; his life and character are scrutinized, and, as if he moved in a blaze of light, not a word and not a deed of his can be kept a secret. Those, on the other hand, whose humble and obscure origin has kept them unknown to the world in their early years, ought, as soon as they approach young manhood, to set a high ideal before their eyes, and to strive with unswerving zeal towards its realization. This they will do with the better heart, because that time of life is accustomed to find favor rather than to meet with opposition. Well, then, the first thing to recommend to a young man in his quest for glory is that he try to win it, if he can, in a military career. Among our forefathers many distinguished themselves as soldiers, for warfare was almost continuous then. The period of your own youth, however, has coincided with that war in which the one side was too prolific in crime, the other in failure; and yet, when Pompey placed you in command of a cavalry squadron in this war, you won the applause of that great man and of the army for your skill in riding and spear throwing, and for endurance of all the hardships of the soldier's life. But that credit accorded to you came to nothing along with the fall of the republic. The subject of this discussion, however, is not your personal history, but the general theme. Let us, therefore, proceed to the sequel. As, then, in everything else, brain work is far more important than mere hand work, so those objects which we strive to attain through intellect and reason gain for us a higher degree of gratitude than those which we strive to gain by physical strength. The best recommendation, then, that a young man can have to popular esteem proceeds from self‐restraint, filial affection, and devotion to kinsfolk. Next to that, young men win recognition most easily and most favorably if they attach themselves to men who are at once wise and renowned as well as patriotic counselors in public affairs; and if they associate constantly with such men, they inspire in the public the expectation that they will be like them, seeing that they have themselves selected them for imitation. His frequent visits to the home of Publius Mucius assisted young Publius Rutilius to gain a reputation for integrity of character, and for ability as a jurisconsult. Not so, however, Lucius Crassus; for though he was a mere boy, he looked to no one else for assistance; but by his own unaided ability he won for himself in that brilliant and famous prosecution a splendid reputation as an orator. And at an age when young men are accustomed with their school exercises to win applause as students of oratory, this Roman Demosthenes, Lucius Crassus, was already proving himself in the law courts a master of the art which he might even then have been studying at home with credit to himself. XIV. But as the classification of discourse is a twofold one, conversation on the one side, oratory on the other, there can be no doubt that of the two, this debating power, for that is what we mean by eloquence, counts for more toward the attainment of glory; and yet it is not easy to say how far an affable and courteous manner in conversation may go toward winning the affections. We have, for instance, the letters of Philip to Alexander, of Antipater to Cassander, and of Antigonus to Philip the Younger. The authors of these letters were, as we are informed, three of the wisest men in history, and in them they instruct their sons to woo the hearts of the populace to affection by words of kindness, and to keep their soldiers loyal by a winning address. But the speech that is delivered in a debate before an assembly often stirs the hearts of thousands at once; for the eloquent and judicious speaker is received with high admiration, and his hearers think him understanding and wise beyond all others. And if his speech have also dignity combined with moderation, he will be admired beyond all measure, especially if these qualities are found in a young man. But while there are occasions of many kinds that call for eloquence, and while many young men in our republic have obtained distinction by their speeches in the courts, in the popular assemblies, and in the senate, yet it is the speeches before our courts that excite the highest admiration. The classification of forensic speeches also is a twofold one. They are divided into arguments for the prosecution and arguments for the defense; and while the side of the defense is more honorable, still that of the prosecution also has very often established a reputation. I spoke of Crassus a moment ago. Marcus Antonius, when a youth, had the same success. A prosecution brought the eloquence of Publius Sulpicius into favorable notice, when he brought an action against Gaius Norbanus, a seditious and dangerous citizen. But this should not be done often, never, in fact, except in the interest of the state, as in the cases of those above mentioned, or to avenge wrongs. as the two Luculi, for example, did; or for the protection of our provincials, as I did in the defence of the Sicilians, or Julius in the prosecution of Albucius in behalf of the Sardinians. The activity of Lucius Fufius in the impeachment of Manius Aquilius is likewise famous. This sort of work, then, may be done once in a lifetime, or at all events not often. But if it shall be required of any one to conduct more frequent prosecutions, let him do it as a service to his country; for it is no disgrace to be often employed in the prosecution of her enemies. And yet a limit should be set even to that; for it requires a heartless man, it seems, or rather one who is well nigh inhuman, to be arraigning one person after another on capital charges. It is not only fraught with danger to the prosecutor himself, but is damaging to his reputation, to allow himself to be called a prosecutor. Such was the effect of this epithet upon Marcus Brutus, the scion of a very noble family, and the son of that Brutus who was an eminent authority in the civil law. Again, the following rule of duty is to be carefully observed: never prefer a capital charge against any person who may be innocent; for that cannot possibly be done without making oneself a criminal. For what is so unnatural as to turn to the ruin and destruction of good men the eloquence bestowed by nature for the safety and protection of our fellow men? And yet, while we should never prosecute the innocent, we need not have scruples against undertaking on occasion the defence of a guilty person, provided he be not infamously depraved and wicked. For people expect it, custom sanctions it, humanity also accepts it. It is always the business of the judge in a trial to find out the truth. It is sometimes the business of the advocate to maintain what is plausible, even if it be not strictly true; though I should not venture to say this, especially in an ethical treatise, if it were not also the position of Panetius, that strictest of Stoics. Then, too, briefs for the defence are most likely to bring glory and popularity to the pleader, and all the more so, if ever it falls to him to lend his aid to one who seems to be oppressed and persecuted by the influence of some one in power. This I have done on many other occasions; and once in particular, in my younger days, I defended Sextus Roscius of Ameria against the power of Lucius Sulla, when he was acting the tyrant. The speech is published, as you know. XV. Now that I have set forth the moral duties of a young man, in so far as they may be exerted for the attainment of glory, I must next in order discuss kindness and generosity. The manner of showing it is twofold. Kindness is shown to the needy either by personal service or by gifts of money. The latter way is the easier, especially for a rich man; but the former is nobler and more dignified and more becoming to a strong and eminent man. For although both ways alike betray a generous wish to oblige, still in the one case the favor makes a draft upon one's bank account, in the other upon one's personal energy, and the bounty which is drawn from one's material substance tends to exhaust the very fountain of liberality. Liberality is thus forestalled by liberality; for the more people one has helped with gifts of money, the fewer one can help. But if people are generous and kind in the way of personal service, that is, with their ability and personal effort, various advantages arise. First, the more people they assist, the more helpers they will have in works of kindness; and second, by acquiring the habit of kindness, they are better prepared, and in better training, as it were, for bestowing favors upon many. In one of his letters, Philip takes his son Alexander sharply to task for trying by gifts of money to secure the good will of the Macedonians. What in the mischief induced you to entertain such a hope, he says, as that those men would be loyal subjects to you whom you had corrupted with money? Or are you trying to do what you can to lead the Macedonians to expect that you will be not their king, but their steward and purveyor? Steward and purveyor was well said, because it was degrading for a prince; better still, when he called the gift of money corruption, for the recipient goes from bad to worse, and is made all the more ready to be constantly looking for one bribe after another. It was to his son that Philip gave this lesson, but let us all take it diligently to heart. That liberality, therefore, which consists in personal service and effort, is more honorable, has wider application, and can benefit more people. There can be no doubt about that. Nevertheless, we should sometimes make gifts of money, and this kind of liberality is not to be discouraged altogether. We must often distribute from our purse to the worthy poor, but we must do so with discretion and moderation, for many have squandered their patrimony by indiscriminate giving. But what is worse folly than to do the thing you like in such a way that you can no longer do it at all? Then, too, lavish giving leads to robbery; for when through over‐giving men begin to be impoverished, they are constrained to lay their hands on the property of others. And so, when men aim to be kind for the sake of winning good will, the affection they gain from the objects of their gifts is not so great as the hatred they incur from those whom they despoil. One's purse, then, should not be closed so tightly that a generous impulse cannot open it, nor yet so loosely held as to be open to everybody. A limit should be observed, and that limit should be determined by our means. We ought, in a word, to remember the phrase, which, through being repeated so very often by our countrymen, has come to be a common proverb: Bounty has no bottom. For indeed, what limit can there be, when those who have been accustomed to receive gifts claim what they have been in the habit of getting, and those who have not wish for the same bounty? XVI. There are, in general, two classes of those who give largely. The one class is the lavish, the other the generous. The lavish are those who squander their money on public banquets, doles of meat among the people, gladiatorial shows, magnificent games, and wild beast fights, vanities of which but a brief recollection will remain, or none at all. The generous, on the other hand, are those who employ their own means to ransom captives from brigands, or who assume their friends' debts, or help in providing dowries for their daughters, or assist them in acquiring property, or increasing what they have. And so I wonder what Theophrastus could have been thinking about when he wrote his book on Wealth. It contains much that is fine, but his position is absurd when he praises at great length the magnificent appointments of the popular games, and it is in the means for indulging in such expenditures that he finds the highest privilege of wealth. But to me the privilege it gives for the exercise of generosity, of which I have given a few illustrations, seems far higher and far more certain. How much more true and pertinent are Aristotle's words, as he rebukes us for not being amazed at this extravagant waste of money, all to win the favor of the populace! If people in time of siege, he says, are required to pay a mina for a pint of water, this seems to us at first beyond belief, and all are amazed; but when they think about it, they make allowances for it on the plea of necessity. But in the matter of this enormous waste and unlimited expenditure, we are not very greatly astonished, and that too, though by it no extreme need is relieved, no dignity is enhanced, and the very gratification of the populace is but for a brief passing moment. Such pleasure as it is, too, is confined to the most frivolous, and even in these the very memory of their enjoyment dies as soon as the moment of gratification is past. His conclusion, too, is excellent. This sort of amusement pleases children, silly women, slaves, and the servile free; but a serious‐minded man, who weighs such matters with sound judgment, cannot possibly approve of them. And yet I realize that in our country, even in the good old times, it had become a settled custom to expect magnificent entertainments from the very best men in their year of aedileship. So both Publius Crassus, who was not merely surnamed the Rich, but was rich in fact, gave splendid games in his aedileship; and a little later, Lucius Crassus, with Quintus Mucius, the most unpretentious man in the world, as his colleague, gave most magnificent entertainments in his aedileship. Then came Gaius Claudius, the son of Appius, and after him many others, the Luculi, Hortensius, and Silanus. Publius Lentulus, however, in the year of my consulship, eclipsed all that had gone before him, and Scaurus emulated him; and my friend Pompey's exhibitions in his second consulship were the most magnificent of all. And so you see what I think about all this sort of thing. XVII. Still we should avoid any suspicion of penuriousness. Mamercus was a very wealthy man, and his refusal of the aedileship was the cause of his defeat for the consulship. If, therefore, such entertainment is demanded by the people, men of right judgment must at least consent to furnish it, even if they do not like the idea. But in so doing they should keep within their means, as I myself did. They should likewise afford such entertainment, if gifts of money to the people are to be the means of securing on some occasion some more important or more useful object. Thus Orestes recently won great honor by his public dinners, given in the streets, on the pretext of their being a tithe offering. Neither did anybody find fault with Marcus Seius for supplying grain to the people at an ass the peck, at a time when the market price was prohibitive; for he thus succeeded in disarming the bitter and deep‐seated prejudice of the people against him at an outlay neither very great nor discreditable to him in view of the fact that he was aedile at the time. But the highest honor recently fell to my friend Milo, who bought a band of gladiators for the sake of the country, whose preservation then depended upon my recall from exile, and with them put down the desperate schemes, the reign of terror of Publius Claudius. The justification for gifts of money, therefore, is either necessity or expediency; and in making them even in such cases, the rule of the golden mean is best. To be sure, Lucius Philippus, the son of Quintus, a man of great ability and unusual renown, used to make it his boast, that without giving any entertainments he had risen to all the positions looked upon as the highest within the gift of the state. Cotta could say the same, and Curio. I, too, may make this boast my own, to a certain extent; for in comparison with the eminence of the offices to which I was unanimously elected at the earliest legal age, and this was not the good fortune of any one of those just mentioned, the outlay in my aedileship was very inconsiderable. Again, the expenditure of money is better justified when it is made for walls, docks, harbors, aqueducts, and all those works which are of service to the community. There is, to be sure, more of present satisfaction in what is handed out, like cash down; nevertheless, public improvements win us greater gratitude with posterity. Out of respect for Pompey's memory, I am rather diffident about expressing any criticism of theatres, colonnades, and new temples; and yet the greatest philosophers do not approve of them. Our Panetius himself, for example, whom I am following, not slavishly translating in these books; so too Demetrius of Phalerum, who denounces Pericles, the foremost man of Greece, for throwing away so much money on the magnificent, far‐famed Propilia. But this whole theme is discussed at length in my books on the Republic. To conclude, the whole system of public bounties in such extravagant amount is intrinsically wrong; but it may under certain circumstances be necessary to make them; even then they must be proportioned to our ability, and regulated by the golden mean. End of Section 17.